Greetings from Gotham, everyone. My name is Dominic, and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today I thought it'd be fun to do another list video. This time I'm giving you 10 great Batman comics for new readers. And while some of the comics on this list are currently out of print, if you're looking to get copies of in-print Batman books, highly recommend you check out our channel sponsor, organicpricebooks.com. You can use my code, TheComicBookReport, at checkout to get $2 off of your order today. Please note, if you use my affiliate code or links for a purchase, I will earn a small commission, but it's a fantastic way to support our channel at no additional cost to you. Thank you for considering. Now let's dive into Batman. First up on our list, of course, I have to talk about Frank Miller's Batman Year One. Now, this to me is the definitive Batman origin story. I know it is for many other readers out there, and I think that this is a fantastic place to start reading Batman, revisiting Batman, or just diving into comics in general. One of my favorite things about this graphic novel, these issues here, is that Frank Miller seems to capture everything that makes a good Batman book a good Batman book. We have so much of the kind of gritty, street crime, noir feeling. There's this timeless quality to the narrative. We have this kind of mythic status with all the bat imagery and some of the heroics that are established here. And it's done in a way that doesn't feel overbearing. I think sometimes Batman can get very colorful, very loud, and very super and super villainy. And I think Year One is a perfect example of what a good Batman book can be when it's stripped down to the basics and done in a way that comes off as more authentic, more real, and less high-flying adventure and more street level. I know in the world of Batman, Frank Miller is probably more known for The Dark Knight Returns, which is also on this list, but I think that this is maybe the perfect place to start for new readers. I would highly recommend this to anyone who's looking to get into comic books, particularly Batman, if they're trying to find a foothold into the universe. I will say there are more modern and more contemporary retellings of Batman's origin or mythos that I will also recommend in this video, but for me it's hard to top Frank Miller's narrative throughout this, and the art style just has something special that I don't see as much in comics today. And I will note as well, there's not necessarily an order for these 10 books. It's not a top 10. These are just 10 recommendations I have in general to start reading Batman. Next on my list is, of course, the incomparable Batman by Jeph Loeb and Tim Sale Omnibus. I think if you can find this collection, I believe it's still in print at the time of this recording, it's an absolute must-get for any new or prospective Batman fan, and in my mind is practically essential Batman reading. While this collection does include things like Batman Haunted Night, Batman The Long Halloween, Batman Dark Victory, and Catwoman When in Rome, I think primarily the big draw for this book is going to be Batman The Long Halloween. This omnibus will give you all of those books I mentioned, but The Long Halloween is really the book here that I think is absolutely essential for new readers. It is an amazing 12 to 13 issue miniseries set early in the crime fighter's career, maybe year like 3 or 4 of him wearing the cowl. It's before he has Robin as his sidekick, and it really explores a lot of Batman's rogues gallery throughout a very fun detective noir narrative. The art style is beautiful and gripping from Tim Sale. It's really hard to describe his artistic style without seeing it for yourself, but once you see it, you know it is unquestioningly a Tim Sale piece of work. One of my favorite things about works like The Long Halloween and its sequel Dark Victory, which are found in this collection, are that they are absolutely rereadable as well. I find myself returning to these same stories almost year after year, so this is one that I would really recommend to be on most Batman collectors' bookcase in some form or another. I read these stories in paperback, I now have it in this oversized hardcover. I know they've released some deluxe editions for each of those stories, and I just think if you can find them, they're a great read. I also enjoy a lot of the stories presented by Tim Sale and Jeph Loeb simply because these Batman books don't need a ton of prior reading. You can really dive in with little to no Batman knowledge and be totally fine and enjoy a good story, but as a much more seasoned Batman fan, you'll certainly get a lot out of them as well. Next up on my list, and I mentioned it earlier, of course, Frank Miller's Batman: The Dark Knight Returns. Now, in many people's mind, this is one of the greatest graphic novels of all time. It unquestioningly revamped the Batman character for modern audiences. It added back that kind of grim, dark aspect to the Caped Crusader, and it explored things that for the mainstream superhero comic books of the time was absolutely unheard of. This was, in nearly everyone's estimation, a complete game changer for not only this character, but by and large the comic book industry. And I will confess, possibly a hot take, The Dark Knight Returns is personally not one of my favorite Batman graphic novels, but I think because it is such a prolific on-ramp for so many readers across the decades, I feel like it has to have a place on this list, because even though it's not perfectly my favorite Batman story, I know that this is a very big story that gains new Batman readers all the time. Yes, it's a little bit dated, but the storyline is still surprisingly fresh, and I don't think has been replicated since. At least not with this same level of acclaim and general legacy. This is considered to be one of the, air quotes, last Batman stories, as it's set later in the crime fighter's career. Now, I don't really believe the Dark Knight Returns universe is canon for the Batman continuity, but a lot of people treat it as a seminal Batman work, and I completely understand why. It's fun to see an aging Bruce Wayne doing everything he can to get back in the saddle and fight for right. And while it's not my personal favorite, again, there's still so much to love in this graphic novel. The conflicts between Batman and Superman, the conflict between Batman and the Joker, to name a few, are absolutely memorable and have really withstood the test of time. And frankly, I think you can do a whole lot worse than reading Batman: The Dark Knight Returns as your first Batman comic. I know, again, that there had to be so many people that started with this after its popularity, and I wonder how many Batman fans today exist because of this work by Frank Miller. Next up, of course, I have Batman and the Monster Men by Matt Wagner. For my money, this is a really underrated gem in the Batman universe. This is part of Matt Wagner's Dark Moon Rising series, and I think it's a wonderful standalone Batman graphic novel that can be read without really much background in the character. Again, set earlier in the crime fighter's career, this is a fascinating detective story that leads into kind of an interesting science fiction tale, but one of my favorite things about this incredible work is this iconic illustration style from Matt Wagner. It again has this kind of timeless quality. It seems to harken back to the kind of Art Deco era so associated with the Batman lore, and I really love it for that. It is such a striking piece that I think captures, again, a lot of great Batman elements. I love seeing Batman do his detective best. I love the kind of outlandish idea of the Monster Men, but how it's put in kind of a grounded sort of scenario. I think another thing that's worth mentioning with this incredible book is the character drama, the dynamics between some of the central cast. We get to see Batman kind of have a girlfriend as well, which is another fun dynamic, seeing how Bruce Wayne navigates that in light of Batman and some of his other responsibilities. This one also faces Batman off against Dr. Hugo Strange, so for those interested in a story about him, this is a fantastic collection and maybe one of my first recommends. It's also nice in that it is a smaller trade paperback collection, so for someone who wants to check out Batman but is maybe looking for a swifter, very succinct, in and out kind of graphic novel story, I think Batman and the Monster Men could be a great fit. And before we go much further, if you're enjoying videos like this and are interested in more comic reviews and miscellany, please subscribe to my channel. We'd love to have you. Thanks for watching. Now let's keep going with today's list. Next, I couldn't do this list without including Batman: Strange Apparitions. This is an older trade paperback, but it is one of my favorites. Strange Apparitions has a lot more old school Batman adventures in the form of very small vignettes. This collection has Batman facing off against some of his fiendish foes in some, again, very colorful and fun adventures. I recommend this to new readers or returning readers who are looking for, again, that classic Batman feel with a sense of throwing back to an older era of comic books. While this one didn't come out of the Silver Age, in some ways it could have felt exactly like it. I think that there are so many modern Batman books that a lot of people will jump to as they start with the book, which I completely understand, but sometimes you need to go back to classics, sometimes you have to find those hidden gems, and I think for someone finding Strange Apparitions as a first or new Batman read, well, they'll just understand certain things about the character that I think are lost in this day and age, or at least not explored in quite the same way. I also find the art throughout all of Strange Apparitions to be absolutely thrilling, gripping, and again, it harkens back to an older style of comic book art that you don't see as much today. And I think it's really a shame because there's a kind of stylishness to a collection like this that has to be experienced for yourself. I will say as well, if you end up reading Batman Strange Apparitions, or perhaps you've already have, if you enjoyed this, you might also enjoy Batman Dark Detective, which is kind of a spiritual sequel and very similar to Strange Apparitions. I know I haven't reviewed this title on the channel yet, but if you're interested, let me know, and I might have to get this in my workflow moving forward. Next on today's list, of course, Batman Hush by Jeph Loeb and Jim Lee. This modern classic showcases a lot of Batman's villains in a very fun detective plot, similar to what you'd find in something like also Jeph Loeb's Long Halloween or Dark Victory, but in a more contemporary fashion. I know pairing him with the artist Jim Lee was a masterstroke of genius, and maybe I'm biased because Jim Lee is my favorite comic book artist, and his art in Batman Hush is at the top of my list for his artwork. And since I love Batman, I could honestly say I've never seen some of these characters more beautifully realized on the page than in this collection. And I know Hush has been republished in hardcovers, things like that. I have the paperback here. You can still find these in print. I absolutely love this story. I do think that it does reward longer-term fans of the Batman mythos, but even as a new reader, I feel like you can jump in and piece together the storyline in such a fashion that you don't feel like you're missing out on some of the essential beats, and I think that this can be read standalone. I even have friends that this is one of the earliest Batman comics they've ever read, and they've been fine. I think for me, if you're looking for a great modern classic story that has a lot of buzz almost continually, you could do a lot worse than Batman Hush. In addition to exploring a myriad of different Batman villains, we also get appearances by a lot of Batman's supporting cast, Bat family, things like that, and I always love seeing that. I think in this way as well, it's a great primer for those who want to get to know more of the Bat family themselves, characters like Oracle or Huntress or Nightwing or things like that. A lot of these people show up throughout Batman Hush. I feel like the narrative is really well paced. You never feel overly rushed. It's a great size story, but it moves along fairly swiftly. A great addition to the list. Okay, now we have one of my personal favorites, Batman the Court of Owls by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo. This kicked off the New 52 era for Batman, and it is still one of my favorite single storylines in all of Batman's history that I've had the pleasure of reading. And because it came in at the beginning of the New 52 era, where DC did kind of a soft reboot, relaunch of a lot of their characters, you can have this as a perfect on-ramp for Batman. You really don't need to have any prior reading or really knowledge of this character beyond what you might know culturally to enjoy this story. And it's relatively self-contained, very entertaining, and it's a good psychological thriller in many ways. The artwork is absolutely jaw-dropping, interesting. I think one of my favorite things Greg Capullo does in the artwork is doing all the detailing of the settings and scene work. I know Scott Snyder's run is really known for giving Gotham a sense of agency or personality itself, and that might never be more true than in the Court of Owls storyline. This also goes into kind of old Gotham and Gotham City history, and I think it's just a really fascinating and rewarding piece of fiction for old and new Batman fans alike. This story arc also, of course, introduces the titular Court of Owls, which for my money is probably my favorite new addition to Batman's rogues gallery of villains in maybe the last 20 or 30 years. I think it's a fantastic idea that really pairs nicely with the character of Batman, and the exploration of it in this volume and some of the subsequent work by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo should absolutely be commended. It's absolutely entertaining, gripping, and really, I believe, will hold up the test of time. This was also the very first comic I chose to review on this channel a few years back, and there's a reason for that. I absolutely love this collection and will really readily recommend this to anyone who hasn't checked it out. This might be a surprising pick to some, but I have to recommend Batman Their Dark Designs by James Tynion IV. This was the start of the Tynion run on the Batman title, and I think it really starts strong. In fact, this was my high bar for Tynion's run on Batman. I really loved it. I think it serves as a great standalone story, and yet also leads in perfectly well to the subsequent story, Joker War. Their Dark Designs is a tale of intrigue that flashes back in the history of some of Gotham's most notorious villains, as they all kind of tried to orchestrate a perfect crime in Gotham City, and we see the repercussions from this flashback in the modern day for Batman, Catwoman, and so many other characters. The art for Batman in this collection is absolutely stunning. The artwork throughout the Tynion era is some of my favorite Batman artwork, other than Jim Lee, which I mentioned during the Hush portion of the video. But really just outstanding work throughout. I think that the actual storyline is very interesting. There's a central mystery to all of it that I enjoyed unwrapping. Absolutely. This is a book I know I'm going to revisit in the future, and I think that this is a great start for new readers as it's a more contemporary pick. This run was only 2 or 3 Batman writers ago, so it came out within the last, 5 years or so, give or take. And I think including something like this on the list would be a good idea, because sometimes a great way to start someone on a comic book series is to include them in something that's more recent, more contemporary, more in the zeitgeist for discussion in this comic book niche. And I think Tynion is such a big name in comic books right now, so having them plugged into his Batman work I think is a fantastic way to start out new readers. Plus, I just think it's frankly a great Batman story that needs more love. For these reasons and so many more, I'm so happy to put Batman Their Dark Designs on this list today. But let me know if you've read Their Dark Designs. I'd love to hear from you and hear some other thoughts on this collection. Okay, my next pick is Batman Earth 1, and this collection we're looking at today is the volume 1 of 3 parts for the Batman Earth 1 universe at the time of this recording. This selection, and actually my final choice in this video, both take place outside of the Batman main continuity in their own kind of side universes, but I think that they're both still outstanding recommendations for great Batman comics for new readers, and there's definitely a reason for that. Batman Earth 1 was written by Geoff Johns with art by the incredible Gary Frank. This dynamic duo really crafted something special for this universe. The idea behind Earth 1 is it's essentially standalone graphic novels that really tell a new and more contemporary reimagining of some of their main DC heroes. I know I've reviewed this and some of the Superman ones on my channel before, but I think that this is an outstandingly great pick because Batman is such an old character that sometimes you want to just take it from the very beginning. And there's been a couple stabs at retelling the origin story. I know I started this video with Batman Year One, which again is probably my favorite definitive Batman origin story, but for something a little bit new, a little more fresh, and certainly different, highly recommend Batman Earth 1. I believe this series is also credited for showing us a Batman where you can see his eyes through the cowl. I know that this is one of the first times they've done this in the history of comics, I believe, and it's done in such a way that it gives Batman so much more soul, so much more empathy than I've ever really seen before, and I loved it. It's such a great story that does one part Batman origin story and one part mystery to try to find a kidnapper and potential murderer. I love to see how they kind of refresh some of the ideas within the Batman universe to make them their own, and in a way it's akin to the Ultimate Universe at Marvel. I look at something like Ultimate Spider-Man and I see very similar ideas with something like Batman Earth 1. It's a contemporary relaunch set in a different universe that refreshes some of our favorite storylines, ideas, characters, and tropes, and I think it was done very well. My last selection for 10 great Batman comics for new readers is, of course, Batman White Knight from Sean Murphy. This is another book set in its own universe within the DC multiverse, and it really plays with a lot of the conventions behind Batman comics in a way I personally enjoyed. Why I think this would be great for new readers is, again, it's a standalone story in a secondary universe where you don't really need context, you don't really need history. You can come in, enjoy a great story, and get out if you want, but if it piques your interest, there's so much more available to you. In White Knight, essentially the gimmick is that the Joker goes sane, and Batman's treated as more of the aggressor or villain in the story, but ultimately the storyline builds and bobs and weaves, and we have a really thrilling good versus evil story, and it's done in a way that plays with a lot of ideas we've seen, but in new and refreshing ways. I think all the character voices are striking, the character dynamics and sense of conflict and pacing are all outstanding, the artwork is really dialed in, sharp, gritty, detailed, and I just cannot say enough about it. There's been a couple sequels within this White Knight universe, and I think this is just such a fun way to experience this character. Again, this run feels very modern, and I think that there's a lot to offer for those that want to check out Batman without a big commitment. This is definitely something that's gotten a lot of praise lately, and I think it could be a great talking piece for those that want to check out Batman. The writing is all there, the storytelling is marvelous, and I think that you can still find this collection in print, and it's something that I definitely recommend. And with that, that's going to cap my 10 great Batman comics for new readers list for today. I know that this was a really eclectic list that might have some really strange choices, but I was trying to get a little bit for everyone. I tried to find things that weren't maybe in everyone's list because I think that there's so many great Batman comics to explore. I'd love to hear your recommendations in the comments. If I didn't include your picks, let me hear what you'd throw in for new readers who want to explore Batman. And if you want to see full reviews on any of these titles, let me know in the comments as well. Thank you for watching, and until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. Don't forget to leave your like, your comment, and consider subscribing. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.